You've been told colon cancer is an old person's disease, something you don't have to think about until you're well into your 60s or 70s. For a long time, that was mostly true. It isn't anymore, and the shift has happened fast enough that most people, and a fair number of doctors, are still working off the old rulebook. Here is the trend that should stop you cold. The number of people under 55 being diagnosed with colon cancer has doubled over the past few decades. And according to the National Cancer Institute, colon cancer is now the leading cause of cancer death in adults between the ages of 20 and 49. Read that again. In that age group, nothing kills more people than this. Number 1. Now, what makes this so hard to sit with is this. Caught early, while it's still confined to the colon, the 5-year survival rate is around 91%. Let it spread outside the colon and take hold in other organs, and that number falls all the way to about 13%. Same cancer. The only thing that changed is when it got found. So the warning signs your body gives you are not trivia. They are quite literally the space between those two numbers. Today I'm going to walk you through the subtle signs of colon cancer that are far too easy to wave off. The ones people, and sometimes their doctors, chalk up to hemorrhoids, to stress, to a bad diet, to simply getting older. And before you close this because you think you're too young or too healthy or too regular for any of this to be about you, understand that the entire reason those numbers are climbing in younger people is that they thought exactly the same thing. I'm Dr. John Myers, and on this channel I take the research that has actually changed and put it in plain language for people who want to stay ahead of their health instead of forever chasing it. There are 8 signs I want you to know tonight. A change in your bathroom habits that won't settle down. Blood you can see. Blood you can't. Weight that falls off for no reason. A fullness that never quite empties. Gas and bloating that overstay their welcome. And the most dangerous sign of them all, which is no sign at all. And here is the thread that ties every one of them together, so this doesn't feel like a random list to memorize. A tumor in the colon is just a growing mass sitting where nothing should be growing. And that mass really only does 3 things. It bleeds a little, it blocks the pipe, and it steals your fuel. Almost every warning sign on this list is one of those 3 showing up somewhere you can actually notice it. Bleeds, blocks, steals. Hold those 3 words in your head and the whole picture comes into focus. And look, catching a problem early, while every option is still on the table, that is the entire game as the years add up. It's the thing my patients and I keep circling back to, with one part of the body after another. So I took everything I tell my own patients and put it into one simple plan for living longer, stronger, and healthier after 60. 28 of the things that actually change as you get older. Your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your memory, your balance, and those are only some of them. Thousands of people are already using it to take back their health. It's already helped so many of them live their best life after 60. The link is on your screen right now, so go check it out at drjohnmyers.com. It's the whole plan, all in one place, and it's the best first step you can take. All right, let's get back to your body and those 8 signs. First, 30 seconds on what we're actually dealing with, because it changes how you hear everything else. Colon cancer, or colorectal cancer, starts in the large intestine, the colon. And most of the time, it does not begin as cancer at all. It begins as a polyp, a small benign growth on the inner wall of the colon. Most polyps never cause any trouble, but some of them, given enough years, can slowly turn cancerous. That slow timeline is the good news buried in this whole topic. How slow? For many polyps, the journey from a harmless little growth to an actual cancer takes something like 10 to 15 years. That is an enormous window. More than a decade in which a single test could find that polyp and quietly end the story before it ever begins. Because if you catch one of those polyps early, it can simply be removed. Colon cancer is one of the very few cancers where the screening test and the treatment can happen in the same moment. Keep that in your back pocket. It's why everything I'm about to tell you matters so much. And you might be wondering why this is showing up in younger bodies at all. The honest answer is that researchers are still working it out, and it's likely a tangle of things. Our diets, the balance of our gut bacteria, rising obesity, more processed food, exposures that start early in life. That question deserves its own full video, and I'll make it. Detection is tonight's job. Just know the trend is real, and it is the reason the old age cutoffs no longer protect you the way they used to. The first sign is a change in your bowel habits, and this is a blocking problem, straight from our list. If you suddenly find yourself constipated when you never used to be, or running to the bathroom with loose stools and diarrhea, or swinging back and forth between the two, that deserves your attention. Now, a bout of diarrhea or a few constipated days is part of being human. A stomach bug, a new medication, a stretch of bad eating, these things pass. What you're watching for is a change that sets in and stays for longer than a few weeks. The mechanism is simple. Your colon has one main job: to absorb water from your waste and form it into a normal, solid stool. When a growing mass gets in the way of that job, the process breaks. If the mass irritates the lining, the colon dumps extra water and speeds everything along, and you get diarrhea. If the mass is big enough to physically narrow the passage, waste backs up behind it, and you get constipation. And when a tumor partly blocks the pipe on and off, you get that telltale alternating pattern: loose then blocked, loose then blocked. So if your bathroom routine has genuinely changed and stayed changed for 3 weeks or more, that is your body asking to be checked. Write it down. Note when it started. The second sign is blood you can see. This is a bleeding problem, the first of several. The medical name for visible blood in the stool is hematochezia, and it is one of the hallmark signs of colon cancer. It might be bright red in the toilet bowl, streaked on the stool, or on the paper when you wipe. Now I want to be fair, because fairness is what keeps you from panicking. The most common cause of blood in the stool is not cancer at all. Usually it's hemorrhoids, swollen veins around the rectum that bleed easily. Another common culprit is diverticulosis, small pouches that form in the wall of the colon and can occasionally bleed. Both are far more common than cancer, but here is where the danger hides for younger people in particular. If you're 35 or 40 and you mention a little blood, the odds are good that someone reassures you it's just hemorrhoids, because at that age, statistically, it usually is. That reassurance feels kind, and it is exactly how early onset colon cancer slips through, one dismissed appointment at a time, while everybody assumes the common thing. So the younger you are, the more you have to be the one who pushes for a real answer, not the one who accepts the easy one. And here is the line you cannot cross. You are not qualified to diagnose your own bleeding as harmless, and neither am I from a distance. Every year, people talk themselves into hemorrhoids for months, while something more serious goes unlooked at. Any blood in the toilet, on the stool, or on the paper gets evaluated, every single time. The third sign is blood you can't recognize as blood, because it has turned your stool dark or black. Still a bleeding problem, wearing a disguise. When blood comes from higher up in the digestive tract, the stomach or the small intestine, it spends hours traveling through the gut, mixing with digestive chemicals along the way, and those chemicals turn it from red to a dark, tarry black. Doctors call that melena. So a black stool usually points upstream, toward the stomach. But it can also come from the colon, specifically the ascending colon on the right side of your abdomen, where blood has the longest journey out and the most time to darken. So no, black stools are not always a colon problem, but they are always a get this looked at problem, because bleeding anywhere in that tract needs a source, and the colon is on the list of suspects. The fourth sign is the sneakiest of the bleeding group, because you never see a single drop. It's iron-deficiency anemia. Sometimes a tumor in the colon doesn't bleed in a way you'd ever notice. Instead, it oozes, a tiny amount, day after day, week after week. You never see it. But over months, that slow drip drains your body's iron reserves. And your body needs iron to build hemoglobin, the part of your red blood cells that carries oxygen. Drain the iron and you can't replace those cells fast enough, and you slide into anemia. What you actually feel is exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, skin that's gone pale, getting winded climbing a single flight of stairs. Now, low iron has plenty of ordinary causes: a diet short on iron, heavy periods in younger women, kidney disease. But this is the rule that saves lives. If a man or a woman past menopause, turns up with unexplained iron deficiency anemia, colon cancer has to be ruled out as the cause. In that group, there's no monthly blood loss to explain it, so the gut becomes the prime suspect. If your doctor ever says your iron is low and stops there, that is your moment to ask the next question. The fifth sign is weight loss you didn't ask for. This is the steal, the third thing on our list, and it works in two ways. First, a large tumor can physically interfere with how your intestine absorbs nutrients from your food, so you take in less than you should. But the second way is stranger and more sinister. A growing cancer is metabolically greedy. To fuel its own growth, it releases signaling molecules, chemicals called cytokines, that essentially hijack your body's metabolism and redirect your fuel toward the tumor. Your body starts burning through its own reserves to feed something that is working against you. Doctors call that wasting process cachexia. The practical version is simple. If the weight is coming off and you have not changed a thing, not your eating, not your activity, that is never something to celebrate quietly. Unexplained weight loss is a symptom that deserves a full workup, and not only for the colon. Several serious conditions announce themselves this way. Now, quick pause, because we're halfway through and you've earned real information here. If this is helping you, do two things for me. Subscribe and tap the like button. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need it. And in the comments, tell me your age and whether anyone in your family has had colon cancer or colon polyps. I read those comments, and the pattern in them tells me which topics to make next for you. All right, the sixth sign is a feeling more than an event. It's the sense that you're never quite empty. You have a bowel movement, and minutes later your body still insists you need to go. Nothing comes, or almost nothing, but the urge won't quit. The medical word for that is tenesmus, and it's a blocking problem again. When a tumor grows low down in the lower colon or the rectum, it presses on the bowel wall and mimics the exact sensation of stool sitting there waiting to pass. Your body keeps sounding an alarm for waste that isn't there. This one gets brushed off constantly, usually filed under irritable bowel syndrome and left alone. And sometimes that's all it is. But when that feeling of incomplete emptying hangs on for several weeks, it belongs on the list of things a doctor looks at, not something you learn to live with. The seventh sign is persistent gas and bloating, blocking again with a twist. There are a few ways a tumor drives this. If the growth is large enough to partly block the colon, gas gets trapped behind it, and you feel bloated and uncomfortable. On top of that, a mass in the colon disrupts the normal fermentation of food and throws off the balance of your gut bacteria, your microbiome, and a disrupted microbiome makes more gas, plainly and simply. And when waste moves slowly past a partial blockage, it sits longer, which gives those bacteria more time to ferment it, which makes even more gas. Now, everyone bloats. Beans do it, a big meal does it, a new medication does it. The signal here is bloating and gas that show up without any change in your diet and refuse to leave after a few weeks. That combination is a red flag worth raising. Which brings me to the eighth sign, and it's the most important one on this entire list, so stay with me for it. The most common early sign of colon cancer is no sign at all, nothing. This cancer usually has to grow fairly advanced before it produces any of the symptoms I've just described. In its earliest, most curable stage, it is almost always completely silent. And that fact is the whole reason screening exists, and the whole reason I made this video. Because the best possible time to find this cancer is before your body ever gives you a reason to look. Wait for symptoms, and you may be waiting until it's harder to treat. So don't let that scare you. Let it make you proactive, and I'll show you exactly how. In the United States, if you're at average risk, the recommendation now is to begin screening at age 45. That number came down from 50 precisely because of the rise in younger cases we started with. You have two main paths, and the best test is the one you'll actually complete. The first path is a colonoscopy, the gold standard. A gastroenterologist passes a thin, flexible tube with a camera through the rectum and examines the entire length of your colon. If they spot a polyp or a suspicious patch of tissue, they can remove it right then and send it to the lab. This is that rare screening that treats you in the same appointment. The downsides are real but modest. There's the bowel prep the day before, which nobody enjoys. there's a very small risk of bleeding or a tear during the procedure, and because it's usually done under sedation, there's a slight risk from the sedation itself. For most people, it's a mild inconvenience and a powerful payoff. And if it comes back clean, you typically don't need another one for a full 10 years. One uncomfortable morning buys you a decade of quiet. The second path, if a colonoscopy isn't for you, is a stool-based test you can do at home. Some check your stool for hidden blood, the fecal immunochemical test, or FIT, and the older fecal occult blood test. Others look for DNA changes in your stool that flag a possible cancer or a large polyp. The advantage is obvious. No procedure, no sedation, no prep, done in your own bathroom. The trade-off is that they're not as good as a colonoscopy at catching polyps before they turn dangerous, and they have to be repeated on a schedule, anywhere from every year to every 3 years, depending on the test. And if one comes back positive, the next step is a colonoscopy anyway. But a stool test you actually do beats a colonoscopy you keep putting off. The worst screening test is the one you never take. And 45 is the latest you should start for average risk. Some people need to begin much earlier. If you have inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, or ulcerative colitis, your risk is higher and your screening starts sooner. If a close family member has had colon cancer or high-risk polyps, the usual guidance is to start at age 40, or 10 years before the age your relative was diagnosed, whichever comes first. So if your father was diagnosed at 35, your screening could need to start as early as 25. There's more nuance depending on which relative it was and what other risk factors you carry, and your doctor will map that out for you. But do not assume a family history is somebody else's problem to track. Know your family's story and bring it to your appointment. So let me bring this home, because I want you walking away with a plan, not just a worry. The signs to never wave off. A change in your bowel habits, constipation, diarrhea, or an alternating pattern that lasts longer than a few weeks. Any blood you can see, dark or black stools. Iron-deficiency anemia with no obvious cause, especially in a man. Unexplained weight loss. That never-empty feeling, tenesmus. And persistent gas and bloating with no change in your diet. Any one of those, hanging on past 2 or 3 weeks, earns a call to your doctor. A simple phone call. But the single most powerful thing on this entire list isn't a symptom. It's the screening you schedule while you feel perfectly fine. That's the move that catches this at 91% instead of 13%. If you're 45 or older and you've never been screened, or you're younger with a family history and no one has ever brought it up, let this be the nudge. Make the appointment. And share this with the people you love. Because in a disease where the whole game is catching it early, a 5-minute conversation genuinely saves lives. If this was useful to you, subscribe, give it a like, and leave me that comment. I'll see you in the next one.